I'm not sure if we're going to go that far. I mean, because let's realize that's $20 million, and then in theory he could test the market again. So let's say he has a similar year to what he had this previous season with the 70% completion percentage, the 29 touchdowns. Then he gets to hit the open market again, or if you want to keep him away and you want to franchise him again, that means you have to give him a 20% raise. So that would have him up to $24 million. And I wrote at the website today in regards to Sam Bradford, there are 9 quarterbacks in this league currently that make $20 million or more dollars. Aaron Rodgers leads the bunch at $22 million. 6 of them have won Super Bowls, Mike. One of them who hasn't is Cam Newton, who obviously was just in Super Bowl 50. And the other 2 are Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan, who have 8 Pro Bowls between them. That is an elite group that both, to be honest, Cousins and Bradford, both of them, don't belong in that conversation. So, it's easy to say pay him $22 million. It doesn't make sense when you're building a roster.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. There's no question about it that you're really putting a lot of money into one spot. I guess the question is, if for 1 year you can afford it, is it worth doing that rather than if you don't have another option, I guess. I mean, and it seems like the draft and free agency are just not great options this particular year.
Yeah, I understand that school of thought, but you can't go in with that mentality. It's almost like going to the grocery store when you're hungry and you just got paid. Just because you have the money and the salary cap's going to go up anywhere between $9 and probably $12 million. So both of these teams can afford it. That's not the issue. But you don't do it because that's the best option. If it's an average option, it's an average option. And maybe you have to take a step back. That's the hard decisions you have to make. That's what I think the Eagles are going to make. And they understand that their best option for 2016 in a vacuum is Sam Bradford. But it's not in a vacuum. You have to pay him a significant amount of money. And perhaps if you take the draft pick, or even if you bring in a guy like Chase Daniel that everyone speculates, maybe that's a better answer long term. So maybe you take the step back to take 2 steps forward 2 or 3 years down the line.
Yeah, look, I agree that the money is a ridiculous amount for these guys. Malcolm Jenkins said the other day that the first half of the season that basically, Bradford was a work in progress. He was a little timid. He was not the leader of that team. He said once he came back from that injury, though, he really grabbed the bull by the horns. He was a change guy, and that coincided with his play. The fact that some of the players, it sound like, recognize that, is it worth keeping the continuity for Bradford and saying, look, again, we know you're a lot of money, but we just aren't ready to give you that long-term deal. If the players, sound like, hey, we warmed up to this guy over the second half of the season, is the continuity a factor?
Well, it is, and I kind of wrote about Malcolm's comments today, and it's a situation where he's a player, so he's got a player's mentality. In general, they're never going to begrudge people that get a big payday. But there's a reason why he lines up at safety on Sundays and he doesn't put together an NFL roster. You have to take all these things into account, and the fact that, okay, if you got to pay Sam Bradford, as certain people have advocated, as much as $22 million, what does that do to the rest of your roster? And you're certainly going to lose in other aspects. It might be a high-profile special teams guy. And you might not think that means a lot until it does mean a lot. And you don't have that guy on your roster because you had to cut him to make room to pay these big salaries. Because remember, it's not just Sam Bradford. You still got to get Fletcher Cox done. You've already had a number of high-profile extensions already that were significant outlays. So all this comes into effect, and that's why Howie Roseman gets paid what he gets paid to make these decisions. It's a very difficult decision. By no means am I trying to say anything other than that, but I think from a monetary standpoint, it's just impossible to convince me that you can pay Sam Bradford $20+ million.
Yeah, and you just said something there that might have scared a lot of people, that you're paying Howie Roseman to make these decisions, and I think that's where people are a little bit concerned.
Well, I get that, and you know, people can criticize Howie for personnel. That's legitimate. You can bring up certain things he hasn't done right, but I don't think there's a lot of room to criticize him, to be perfectly honest, when it comes to contracts. He is not going to give out contracts that are going to put the Eagles in bad positions, as was done under Chip Kelly. He's just not going to do it. He's too smart a negotiator. That's the strength of him in that particular position. Now, you're right. You should have some serious concerns about the personnel aspect, but I think you should rest assured and sleep well that he's not going to give out bad contracts.
Yeah, no, I'm not a Howie hater by any stretch of the imagination. You know, there's our people out there, though, that, you know, as I wrote the article the other day, people remember your misses like Marcus Smith and Danny Watkins, Nate Allen, those type of picks, more so than they remember your hits, you know, like Fletcher Cox and Michael Kendricks and Vinnie Curry and Jordan Matthews. I mean, guys like that. You remember the misses a lot more, and he's about 50-50, 60-40 on the positive side here. John, we saw Jonathan Mayo, he retired early, and again, the concussions, a lot of things there, continuing trend in the NFL, and apparently the Patriots are not too happy about the situation. But I would anticipate that this won't be the only guy again this offseason. More and more, we talk about it, but it looks like more and more things like this are going to continue to happen.
Yeah, I think it is. As people get more educated, I still don't think it's going to be as consistent as some people think. You take somebody like Gerard Mayo. I mean, he's had 3 straight injury-prone seasons besides any concussions. He was on the downslope of his career, and I'm not sure he had much left anyway. So it's kind of tough to take these out and automatically put he's scared of CTE or whatever. That's why he's leaving the game, because he's not the player he once was, and that could enter into it. So I think we have to be very, very careful. I wrote about Dr. Joe Maroon, who's the team neurosurgeon of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been heavily in to CTE research, and you have to be very careful because the science is in its infancy, and people really jump to these conclusions quickly. In almost every case when there's a tragedy and you can bring up the names, they automatically jump to CTE. And I think you have to be very cautious because there still has to be a lot more research because before there's a direct causal connection between that particular disease and some of the horrible things we've seen. You know, people say O.J. Simpson murdered or allegedly murdered his ex-wife because of CTE. People say that's why Aaron Hernandez went off the rails. I don't think it's fair to say that at this point. And unfortunately, a lot of the hysteria is causing people to be very, very scared, and certainly people in this industry.
John McMullen, everybody, 97.3 ESPN.com, of course, covering the Eagles and the NFL for today's Pigskin.com. A lot of NFL offseason storylines that we'll continue to count down as we get closer to the draft here. And we also should be getting some of the primetime games released here shortly before the NFL schedule comes out in April. But I guess 2 big names to keep an eye on. One will be Robert Griffin III and Johnny Manziel. Those 2 guys most likely will be looking for new jobs out here. But is Robert Griffin III, in your opinion, a legitimate quarterback for teams? Are teams going to be looking at him this free agent period as you know, maybe as a starter? Do you think he's going to get starter bites out there?
I'm not sure if he's going to be brought in as a starter and said, it's your job. But I think there's a possibility, specifically if you look at the Los Angeles Rams, that's a possibility for him that he'll be brought in and at least given the opportunity to compete for a starting job. Dallas is going to be another natural situation because he grew up in Texas. He feels comfortable there. And he could settle in because the Cowboys obviously need the heir apparent to Tony Romo, but they're not ready to move on just yet. So it depends. I think he could find a situation that will let him compete for a starting job, or he can take the comfort factor from the Cowboys because I think Johnny Manziel's out of that equation.
Is he in anybody's equation? Is Johnny Manziel in anybody's equation?
I don't think so. Not right now. Not until he fixes his personal life. I mean, it's gone far beyond football at this point. He's got to clean up his personal life. And if he does that, if he shows that, then I think he'll have the opportunity to get back in the NFL because he does have talent. But remember, this last incident with his ex-girlfriend where he's accused of striking her and rupturing her eardrum, that would be under the new domestic violence policy, which in theory would leave him open for a 6-game suspension even if he signed somewhere. So that's another curveball in the equation. So it's going to be a long struggle for Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm interested in Robert Griffin. I think that he, has gotten a little bit of a bad rap. He had a bad rap as being not the best teammate down there. But he, as a rookie, took that team to the playoffs, something that has been a struggle for that franchise. And if not for that injury, who knows what would happen to him. He was a pretty exciting player in this league. So I am kind of interested to see what his next turn is.
Yeah, we talk about talent. We talk about Johnny Manziel talent. Robert Griffin III had much more talent than a Johnny Manziel as a comparison standpoint. And you're right, his rookie season, the Redskins, that's the last time the Redskins won the NFC East before they won it this past season. He won those final 7 games, you remember, Mike. He played hurt in the playoffs against Seattle. He went out on his shield, so to speak, and that's where he got hurt. He injured himself almost catastrophically, torn the ACL, the LCL, more than one ligament. So if this guy's healthy, he's got so much talent that somebody could get on the bottom floor of him because obviously you're not going to pay him $20 million like people are talking about Cousins and Bradford. To have that kind of upside, I think that's a gamble worth taking.
You taking a gamble over Bradford if you're the Eagles?
No. I've been steadfast on that. Unless he gets to the open market, which I think he will because the Eagles are not going to put the tag on him, unless he gets out there and realizes the numbers aren't going to be near what he thought they were going to be, and I'm talking about somewhere in the $14, $15, $16 million range, then I would bring him back. And hopefully lesser years than more. I prefer 2. I would stomach 3. But that number would have to drastically come down. There's no way I'm going near $20 million. Tom Condon's laughable $25 million sort of take on things is exactly that. It's almost, it should be the punchline of a joke more than anything else. Again, contracts have a lot to do with timing. We all understand that. But how in any way can you say, I'm going to give Sam Bradford more than Aaron Rodgers? You don't have to do that. There's nobody in the NFL that's crazy, even quarterback desperate team.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The timing is a big thing, and he's in a time where there's not a lot of great quarterback options out there, so he might just be a guy. Hey, look, and he was the last guy to get one of those rookie contracts. He might just buck the system one more time. We'll keep an eye on it. John McMullen has a great article up right now at 973ESPN.com on Malcolm Jenkins' comments. Make sure you check that out on our website. NBA trade deadline tomorrow. John and I will talk a little hoops on tomorrow's show. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, Mike.